Hello and welcome to the Pre-Chiro Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass, and today we're having a meaningful conversation out in Wisconsin with a professional chiropractor, Dr. Skip Wyss. Skip, can you get us started by just introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about that moment in life when you decided you wanted to become a chiropractor? What was it attracted you to this path?
Oh, yeah. Thanks so much for having me on, Dr. Ben. I really, truly appreciate it. Chiropractic has been in my life since I was 2 years old, but I chose to be a part of it when I was 18 after I tore my knee up. At that point, that changed everything in my life. Being 18 years old, under verbal communication with multiple D1 schools to go play football and snap the football back to the field goal kickers as a long snapper, and then tore my knee up. My chiropractor approached me about being a chiropractor right after a physical therapist told me that my chiropractic care has nothing to do with the way that my body was healing. And so the story goes, man, I walked on to Palmer's campus in Davenport, Iowa. Chills rolled up my spine. I knew it was where I was supposed to be. It was full on divine intervention from God that was the place I was supposed to be, just like when I met my wife. And now here I am 19 years later, actually way later than that. I mean, 22 years later, actually. I knew I wanted to be a chiro since I was 18. So from that point forward, man, we've been letting it rip. Knew what I wanted to do in undergrad and just stuck to it. And now here I am 15 years into practice.
Yeah, if we could tease out some details of you having that clarity from the age of 18 and there being obviously years before chiropractic school starts to prepare yourself, what would you kind of say as a reflection on that time that you did? And then maybe what would you say to somebody who is 18 today to get them ready for chiropractic school? I'm just curious.
No, that's a great question. So let me answer it this way. Number one, you want to be prepped. So let's start high school up. So in high school, if you know you want to be a chiropractor at an early age, I commend you. I applaud you. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing that you should have. But keep in mind, you're going to really decide your decision in your career when you're in your 20s, when you're in your early 20s in undergrad. So don't pitch yourself and stick your life into chiropractic immediately unless you absolutely know without a shadow of a doubt that that's what you want to do, number one. But once you have that passion, once you have that choice, once you've made that decision, do not stick one toe in, don't stick one foot in, jump in with both feet, get wet up to your neck, and dive into chiropractic 100% and understand what we do as a culture, what we do as a healthcare system, and then what we do that allows the body to keep its constant communication and heal itself. That's what you need to 100% understand and wrap your head around. Once you get into grad school, I'm an undergrad. I'm going to highly, highly recommend you stay away from human biology. I think that couldn't be one of the worst things you could go down. You need to go down and get your bachelor's of science in kinesiology, in applied kinesiology, in some form of movement. I wouldn't recommend going the pre-med route. I think that's actually an absolute waste of time. Sticking your money into a bunch of organic chemistry and biochemistry, that is a good choice if you're going to be a medical doctor because you got to understand pharmacology. But from a body health perspective and movement perspective, you need to understand movement and you need to understand physiology, how the nervous system actually works, how it plays out, and what it actually does and controls the body. You need to be in that route. You need to take great anatomy courses, and you need to let the fire burn in your belly to understand that you can completely change the health of mankind becoming a chiropractor. So once you do that and you walk around and you start stacking those chips up on your shoulders right here and keep stacking them up, knowing that everybody who's going to doubt you and look at you and say, I don't know if that's the right career decision, all you're going to do is snap backs all day and things like that and expect people to get better and pop and pray and all this other stuff. Heck no, you dive in with both feet, you put conviction underneath you, and you start hanging out with docs like me, and I'll light a fire under your butt and keep you motivated. But that's what I would do. So stay away from the human bio route. That's actually where I went. It was a good decision. Don't get me wrong. You're going to get a good education, but you need movement. You need to understand applied kinesiology. You need to understand the physiology of movement so it better prepares you for chiropractic college.
Absolutely. And if a student was going to a chiropractic office such as yours, how would you recommend that they approach the office from an experiential standpoint? What should they be looking at? What questions should they be asking? How can they get the most out of an observation? And then what can they do to also reflect on the experiences, like getting adjusted or going through a day 1, day 2, or completing a care plan? How can we really help pre-chiropractic students get the most out of their experiences out in the real world in practices such as yourself, and also maybe just touch on how your practice is flowing and operating?
Dang, man, you're knocking these questions out of the park. This is awesome. So here's the thing, Dr. Ben. First things first, when you step into an office like ours, we're very, very high volume. We're very, very high pediatrics. We see between 70 and 75% kids. And of that, half of those kids are under the age of 6 months. So we see tons of newborns and tons of babies. So the biggest thing you can do when you step into a chiropractic office is find what you want in your practice, and also look at things that may or may not be cohesive with what you want to do. Look around, see what actually clicks with you. What are some systems? What are the way? Even look at like how the front office team works and how they greet patients, because your patient experience in your office is the number one most important thing that you can do for somebody, is give them an amazing experience. And that starts from the minute you walk in the door. So when you walk in the door of that chiropractic office, look and see how the team greets you. Look and see how the front desk says hi to you. Look and see how the doctor interacts with you. Are they smiley? Are they happy? In fact, before you even interact with going into the back office or in the open bay, which is what we have, and observe adjusting all day in clinical skills, sit down in the reception area and just get a feel. Get a feel for what the energy is. Get a feel for how patients move. See how doctors like myself and other doctors that see a large amount of patients, how we handle that volume during the day, how we cycle our team members and our patients and our practice members in and out of the office, who gets hugged, who doesn't get hugged, who allows us to be a part of their experience, and how much of that experiential amount of patient interaction is important. Do they come up and get the patients? Do they take them back? How is it all run? How personal is it? And then if you're that type of person and you love that type of environment, run with it. If you're not, and you want something a little bit more clinical, you want something a little bit more sterile, start observing other chiropractors and just see what clicks with you. But when you come in with a notepad, come in with an iPad, come in with something that you can take notes on. Don't bother the doctor when he's taking care of the patients. Sit back and watch and just take it in. When you see him take care of 20, 30 people in a half hour, just see how it happens. See what the flow's like. See how connected and present he is with that patient when they're in front of him. And then when you hear him explain or talk or answer questions, that's where your nuggets are. That's where your gold is. Understanding and hearing how I myself explain things to patients on a 5th grade level, so everybody understands what's going on. But I'm clear, I'm articulated, and I do it with so much love and passion in my heart. Patients love it, and that's the biggest thing. And then after that, sit down with him over his lunch hour, chalk out time either after the practice is done, or get on a Zoom call the next day with the doc over lunch and just start asking questions then. Because one of the biggest things that I needed to learn early on in practice was this: never hesitate to ask for help. Never hesitate to ask questions, because if that doctor agreed to let you come into their office, their environment, their sanctuary, their place of health, and they agreed to let you in, trust me, they want to help you. If they didn't want you in the office, they don't want to help you, okay? But if they allow you in, you're being allowed into something that's very, very special and sacred. And in that trust, don't hesitate to ask. And in fact, I actually see it as a massive insult if I have a student come and hang with me all day and they don't ask me questions, and they don't ask me good questions. Like the toughest thing is, here's the deal, students, when you're in an office, never ask a doctor why he put his hands there. Trust me, don't ask that question. Ask about analysis, ask about checking, but don't ask specifically, why did you address the right side and not the left side? That all comes from your analysis. Ask him about his analysis. Walk me through how you find, detect, and then correct subluxation. Those are the questions we ask, and then I would just take it from there.
Absolutely. And you touched on a number of skills. I'm wondering if you can go just a little bit deeper and we can tease out some details for these students to really start to build a better understanding of the skill sets, all the different types of skill sets that chiropractors express when they're in the flow in practice. One was communication. How did you develop your communication skills? Maybe come up with some creative ways that students can start to develop their confidence looking at people and relating to people, listening to people, speaking, not only one-to-one, but maybe one-to-many, or how do you communicate with your staff? There's just so much there. I'll just leave it at that just so that we can hone in on communication for this one.
Yeah. So let's dive into communication. There's a couple things you can do. Number one, I would highly recommend you hire a coach and keep it within your price level of what you can afford, and maybe keep it in the price level of what you can afford. Make your butt pucker up just a little bit. If it makes you uncomfortable, it's probably worth the money. But then learn how they communicate. So watch the greats. Listen to the chiros that inspire you and how they talk. Number one, listen to podcasts. I've got an amazing podcast called the Prime Podcast. Before that, it was called the Prime Pediatric Podcast. We haven't missed an episode in 4 years. But here's the deal. If you get on there and listen, you can hear how I articulate to other chiropractors, and I talk the exact same to our patients. But listen to rhythms, listen to cadences. Give yourself opportunities to pause and listen. But your communication is this. Understand chiropractic so well that it seems easy. If you can't explain subluxation simply, then you don't know it well enough. So you need to understand philosophy incredibly well. You have to have a strong philosophy. Dive into the green books. Listen and read to what BJ had to say. I wouldn't say speak like BJ because that was back in 1930, 1940. A lot's changed since then. But understand the communication and how you can actually understand subluxation and then explain it extremely simply. And always concentrate on explaining everything you do to a fifth grader. No older, fifth grade level. And it needs to be short and it needs to be succinct. The reason why is because the way society has changed in the last 10 years, we're consuming data in 15-second intervals, in 30-second intervals. We're not sitting down reading long-form content anymore. We're not sitting down reading long-form research articles. The public isn't doing that. They're consuming all of their education through TikTok, through Reels on Instagram, through Reels on Facebook, through Shorts on YouTube. And understand that all of those are under 60 seconds long. So if your explanation, unlike this explanation, is longer than 60 seconds, you probably lost them. But stay in a fifth grade level and really understand what you're doing. The other thing about communication that I want to drive home with you is understanding how the body actually functions and works. So there's a thing in chiropractic that we use all the time. It's called a Merrick chart. A lot of people put different spins on these things, but basically it's the peripheral nervous system mapped out from the spine, okay? Understand that chart. And I cannot emphasize that to you enough as to where those nerves start and what organs and glandular tissues and cell tissues they actually have control of. If you understand that, you can communicate to anyone. And a lot of people will put different spins on and call it a chiropractic fuse box or call it X, Y, and Z and color it different numbers and color it different colors and number it different numbers. It doesn't matter. Understand that C1 through C7 and what it controls. Understand T1 through T12 and what that controls. And understand L1 through L5 and sacrum and what all of those nerves actually control. You can then be able to explain anything to a patient because all of those nerves have end games and all those organs communicate back through the central nervous system. So if you understand a Merrick chart, that peripheral nervous system chart that you're all going to sit in front of in undergrad and in grad school, you can communicate to anyone.
Just to bring the context into the conversation, you said that you see 50% more or less of people or of kids that are 6 months or younger.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, can you kind of just talk about your arc of education, the pathway that you took to develop yourself into somebody that has the skills, the training, the confidence, the clarity, and the ability to work with this special population, and then also maybe just expand it out to kids and talk about like what it's like to become a pediatric chiropractor?
Yeah, absolutely. So the key with taking care of kids is you have to keep it simple. A lot of docs get paralysis by overanalysis. And what I mean by that is at times it's not that we overtrain. It's just that we overtrain to a point where we become tight. And what I mean by that is if you look at any sport, if you look at anything in your life, when you're truly comfortable with things, you make extremely difficult things look easy. So get your training really, really well. Work with the ICPA, work in your pediatric clubs when you're in undergrad if you want to actually take care of kids. I'll be honest with you, man. I wanted to come back to Green Bay and take care of Green Bay Packers. That's what I really wanted to do. I was so involved in sports chiropractic when I was an undergrad. I absolutely loved it. And then what completely changed my life was the birth of my daughter. My daughter was born 2 months after I graduated Palmer College. Julie still had about 15 days before she graduated from Palmer College. She was a trimester behind me. And the birth of my daughter changed my life. After she was born, she wouldn't look at my wife. She wouldn't turn her head to the right. And to be honest with you, I was not prepared to see children, let alone see infants. But all I could do was go back to the stuff that I was trained on, how to detect and eliminate subluxation in not clinic, but in technique class. Listen to those docs that are teaching you technique. Listen to how they analyze, detect, and then eliminate subluxation, particularly in kids. Because if you can understand how to do it in children, you can take care of any subluxation in front of you. But if all you understand as adults, taking care of kids gets a little difficult because your velocity, your thrust, your depth, everything changes. You can always add depth. You can always add velocity. But if all you're used to is very high velocity and very deep depth, it's pretty hard to take that back when you take care of young kids. It's just, it's body reflexes, okay? But here's the deal. Get proper training and get all the confidence in the world. So I had to rely on what I had been taught in technique class, adjusted my daughter when she was 9 hours old. Why I waited so long, I have no idea. I had no confidence. I had to work myself up to take care of my own flesh and blood, which was my daughter, because I was scared. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I knew that she had an atlas subluxation. I kind of checked her with Leopold's maneuver, which is frowned upon now. And I had no idea what to do. All I knew is that her atlas on the right palpated really big, and I thought I had to push it back to the left. And I did. And you know how it is. The body starts to heal itself. The communication comes back. We cleared out that atlas, and she immediately looked to the right at my wife. From that point forward, my life changed because I saw how incredibly fast the nervous system responds when it's new and fresh. And in a newborn, when they're 9, 10 years old, I knew that I could change the world if I started taking care of more and more kids. And then I met a phenomenal coach that took care of families. And that, again, was divine intervention because he called me out of the blue. I didn't call him. He got my name from one of my friends in school that I was looking to start a family practice, and he called me. And he ended up being, that's Dr. Ogie Russell out of Canada with the Practice Evolution program. He's now retired. That program is now owned by Dr. Christina Stitcher, who's another person that you should get in contact with. But he's who gave me my massive pediatric foundation, pushed me to become certified through the ICPA. I highly recommend that you get in with the ICPA as well and take those classes and learn. Just learn. Do you need your certifications? We'll see, okay? It depends on how in-depth you really want to go. But get trained and start absorbing. Hang out with docs like myself that understand children, that see hundreds of them a week, hundreds of them a day, in fact, and thousands a year, because we're the ones that know how to take care of these little itty-bitties. But the more important thing, we're the ones that know how to communicate to the parents so these kids actually get the care. That's the key, because nothing hurts more than when you've got a little one in front of you and you know in your soul right here that that kid needs care, and that parent doesn't believe that you can deliver the goods. And that comes back to your confidence in how well you prepared for that moment of your life to know that beyond a shadow of a doubt that that kid needs your care.
Powerful. I don't think people could really understand the amount of experience that you've been able to gain of taking care of thousands of babies. Mm-hmm. But can you kind of just walk us through like a day in the life? You just talked about how high volume you are, but like moment to moment, interaction to interaction, what are some of the things that you're, the subtle cues that you've developed over time that you're able to pick up on?
Well, okay. So for a doc to tell you that a lot of it comes from experience, it does, but understanding subtle cues. In chiropractic, it's commonly frowned upon to constantly be talking to patients about symptoms, because we shouldn't be using as symptoms, because they're symptomatic. They're not objective. They're not clear black and white findings. But I would tell you, when you have a parent that sits in front of you and they talk to you about the symptoms of their child and what's going on, that does help you get a direction into where you're going and what you're going to be correcting. It doesn't mean that a kid comes in with colic and you have to clear out T5, which controls their stomach, and you have to clear out their sacrum, which controls their bowels. But I'm telling you, 8 times out of 10, that's usually where the pattern is. So you can check there first, and if you don't find it, you know where to start. That's the key. Symptoms give you an idea as to where to start. They don't tell you where to adjust. So when you're talking to parents and getting in things like chronic ear infections, almost always are on the right, 85% of the time. Why? The mechanics of birth will tell you that most babies that are vaginally delivered, in fact, almost all, face the inside of the left thigh, dip out their right ear, and cause a right traumatic subluxation to the right of the atlas because they get pulled out. That's knowledge that I've gained, but also clinical experience in understanding thousands and thousands of births. But these subtleties, when the parents come in and tell you what's going on, I'm telling you right now, never check an atlas first. Most chiros won't tell you that. In fact, when you're in school, they will tell you atlas, 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 atlas. I get that. I hold space for that. I love checking an atlas, and I love adjusting atlases. I would check occiput first. The reason why is that's how the skull seeds itself to the top part of the brainstem, to the top part of the brain, which has a tremendous effect on irritation to the brainstem when subluxated. It's the same thing with sacrum. They'll always tell you to check S2 tubercle or check for an AI sacrum, but nobody ever says go back and check the occiput. The occiput's key. Have I found in my clinical experience, I find more first-time occipital subluxations after birth than I do atlas. And you can take that to the bank. And if anybody wants to challenge me on that, let's come have an awesome conversation so we can both learn, because I think an occiput needs to be checked 10 times out of 10 before an atlas is even touched. Then what I find is the next day when I have that baby come back in for their second check, I almost always find an atlas subluxation. But I will tell you that that occiput is balanced and still staying in place. The other thing I would tell you to do is stop using the word hold when you're communicating to your patients. Use the word balance. When I look at you and I tell you, hey, we need to work on your balance, innately, what do you think? You're going to think the brain, the nervous system. If I tell you I want to see if you're holding or not, that means to retard. That means to slow down. That means to stop. That conversation can't happen anymore in chiropractic. We need to talk about balance and neurological balance and communication. So a day in my life is tons of kids, when I get moms that come in asking questions about breastfeeding, asking questions about constipation, colic, problems with them going to the bathroom, even with diarrhea, teething. These are all things that directly will affect the autonomic nervous system, but more importantly, affects parasympathetics versus sympathetics. So always check the C-spine first and the sacrum. Then if you have to play and go into the T-spine and L-spine, do it. But understand the top and the bottom is the key. And I always love using this analogy when I'm working with parents. They will commonly ask, like, why don't you adjust between their shoulder blades? My other chiropractor adjusted them between the shoulder blades. The reason why is this: if you take a towel that's soaking wet and you wring it out, where do you have to grab it? You grab it on both ends, right? Where does all the water come out? It doesn't come out where you grabbed it. It comes out in the middle, right? Well, that's where all the symptoms are. But the top and the bottom is where the strain is on that nervous system. So we need to get that irritation cleared out and get that balance back. That's key. And then understanding and having clear communication with those patients. So the day in the life is this: when I get patients to come in the morning, we see tons of kids, not a lot in the morning. We see some, but as soon as school flips around and school is off, we're packed with kids in the morning, and then we have adults in the afternoon. It's just how it works out with scheduling. But usually from 3 o'clock till 6, it's massive adjustomania. From 9 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock, it's adjustomania. We have hour increments built in our block where we block schedule. So we're allowed to see 4 new patients a day. Usually those spots are full. If not, there's progress exams, there's reports going on, and just all around amazing chiropractic. How is that for an answer for that, Dr. Ben?
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Skip. I want to honor your time, and thank you so much for sharing with the students today. That was really in depth, and there was a lot of detail to tease out of that. I mean, watch that back, students. If you just heard it once, hear it again and again and again. All right, that's a wrap.